But let me talk about the last major component of the Conrad budget and how it differs substantially from the Ryan budget. And that is the area of revenues. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about revenues. So what does the Democratic budget do in this regard? It takes our revenues to 19.5% of our gross domestic product, GDP. Mr. President, that's the same amount that was raised during the Clinton presidency when we had unprecedented prosperity and job growth in America. Now, how do we get there? How do we get the revenues that we need in order to be able to bring this debt under control? Well, Senator Conrad has given us some direction on how we can do that. He's pointed out that shelters and loopholes need to be closed. These are inefficiencies in our tax code today. I've taken the floor on 2 occasions recently to talk about some that I think we should eliminate. One, the ethanol subsidy. We had a vote on the floor of the Senate. The majority of the senators voted in favor of eliminating the ethanol subsidy. Why? Because it's not needed. The ethanol sales are not dependent upon a federal tax break. Secondly, it's causing a disruption in the agricultural community. I pointed out the poultry industry in Maryland suffers from the high price of corn, costing us jobs. So eliminating the ethanol subsidy is a win-win situation. Why not take that money and use it for deficit reduction? I've also pointed out that the major gas companies in this country are receiving subsidies from the taxpayers. Their profits in the first 3 months of this year were $34 billion. They certainly don't need the help from the taxpayers. The taxpayers have already given them too much in the price of gasoline at the pump, which has hurt our economy except for the profits of the gasoline companies. So there are tax loopholes, there are shelters that can be closed that amount to a substantial amount of federal expenditures. And yes, the highest income taxpayers, the millionaires and billionaires, is it reasonable or right or fair to expect that they should continue to get these lower tax rates that were temporarily extended under the Bush administration indefinitely when we're trying to figure out ways in which we can bring the budget into balance? I must tell you that Senator Conrad has made it very clear that there would be no change from the current tax rates for those families that have $1 million of income or less. That's a pretty, I think, generous commitment about not changing tax rates, particularly during these economic times. So let's compare the budgets. The Republican budget, the Ryan budget, says, look, all the savings is going to come out of the spending side, and in fact, we're going to have some additional tax cuts, asking middle-income families to pay more, while our wealthiest enjoy even more tax breaks. The Democratic budget submitted by Senator Conrad says we're going to be balanced. 50% of our deficit reduction is on the revenue side, but that includes reducing tax expenditures, tax spending. We spend money in the tax code, $1.4 trillion a year. I really don't understand the difference if we're spending money on housing on the tax code or spending money on housing on the appropriations bill. Both should be subject to the same type of scrutiny. So why aren't we using a similar standard? Well, we have a chance to do that in the Conrad budget. 50% from revenues, including tax spending, 50% from direct spending cuts. That's a balanced approach. That's a credible approach. It's an approach that will protect our most vulnerable. Our students are protected to make sure that we continue our commitment to education and to the cost of higher education through the Pell Grants. Our seniors are protected in that we do not do what the Ryan budget would do with Medicare and Medicaid.